Many people today no longer remember the name Juan Manuel Fangio, but the talented Argentinian racing driver was the first to win 5 Formula One World Championships, 4 of them consecutive. He achieved this feat in the 50s. It took a full 45 years before another racing driver matched him. The great Michael Schumacher, in fact, won his 5th title in 2002 and surpassed Fangio by winning 7, 5 of them consecutively, driving a Ferrari. But Fangio's Formula One world was very different from Schumacher's, and not just because the cars were different. At that time, racing drivers competed in Formula One and in sports car world championships on the same weekend, making both races more difficult because of the physical strain and because of the risks involved. In the 50s, racing drivers lost their lives on the track every week due to the total lack of safety. So Fangio competed in both the World Championships with cars from 5 different manufacturers. The last of these was Maserati, with which he won his 5th Formula One title in 1957. He also achieved numerous victories with the Trident brand in the World Sports Car Championships, thus concluding a brilliant career. Among the cars he raced, the one that gave him the most satisfaction was the Maserati 300S. The origins of the Maserati 300S date back to 1954, when a prototype was built, later called the 250S, which featured an engine derived from the 250F single-seater with a displacement of 2.49 liter, designed by engineer Gioacchino Colombo. Mounted on an A6 GCS chassis and paired to a 4-speed gearbox, this prototype participated unsuccessfully in the 1954 Mille Miglia. The failure did not discourage Maserati's engineers, who built another prototype for the Supercorte Maggiore Grand Prix in Monza. The 250S performed admirably, but ultimately had to retire due to a broken rear axle. So the technical staff analyzed the events of that race and decided to modify the project with a new engine. These initial experiences served to define all the construction details of the 300S, also in light of the fact that engineer Colombo left his position to move to Bugatti, leaving his place at the design office to his close collaborator, the engineer Vittorio Bellentani. It was thus decided to build a new long-stroke inline 6-cylinder engine with geometric dimension of 84 by 90 mm, a solution dear to Bellentani, whose displacement was 2.99 liter, derived directly from the 250F engine. This engine had a compression ratio of 9:1 and delivered 245 horsepower at 6,200 rpm, but it was certainly safer over long distances than the 250F engine. Also, it achieved almost the same power, but without overdoing the mechanicals and using the traditional cylinder head with 2-gear-driven overhead camshaft, 2 valves per cylinder, and dual magneto ignition. Fuel was supplied by 3 Weber 42 DC-03 carburetors. Lubrication was dry sump and the clutch was dry multiplate. The maximum speed was 290 km per hour. Great care was taken in designing the chassis, which consisted in a tubular trellis structure with both elliptical and round cross section. The first 5 chassis were built directly by Maserati and only later was production entrusted, as usual, to Gilco of Milan after making some structural changes to certain sections. The 4-speed and reverse gearbox was a single unit with a differential in a transverse position. The front suspension was independent with double wishbones, coil springs, and Uda Hill hydraulic shock absorber. The rear suspension featured an inverted Dedion axle with transverse leaf spring and Udahil shock absorber. The front and rear brakes were hydraulic-operated drums with a choice of drums and brake pad holders of different size and diameters depending on the car's need. The wheels were 5 par 16 spokes supplied by Borani of Milan, while the tires were 6 par 16 at the front and 6.5 par 16 at the rear. The Maserati was equipped with Pirelli Stella Bianca tires as the initial supply. Medardo Fantuzzi created the bodywork at his workshop in Modena, drawing inspiration from the sports cars he supplied before to Maserati. The traditional trident, framed by aluminium profiles, was set into the large front air intake. Driving was on the right back in the previous trend because clockwise driving was the norm of most European circuits. In accordance with the Fédération Internationale dell'Automobile regulation for the sport category, the driver's seat was protected by a low, wraparound windshield that connected to the headrest, which, however, was not present on all models. Among the distinctive features that immediately distinguished the silhouette of the 300S from other cars were the large air intakes on the sides, as well as the shape of the tailgate, which housed the 150-liter fuel tank and the 20-liter oil tank. In compliance with current regulations, 2 tiny doors were provided to facilitate driver access to the cockpit, although in reality they proved completely unnecessary due to the small size. The lower part of the left side was traversed by 2 overlapping exhaust pipes that terminated near the rear wheel. The 300S had a wheelbase of 2.31 meter, a front track of 1.30 meter, and a rear track of 1.25 meter. Overall, the car was 4.15 meter long, 1.45 meter wide, 0.98 meter high, and weighed 780 kilos unladen. During the 1955 racing season, the Maserati 300S suffered some teething problems, primarily lacking power. These were resolved in 1956 with the adoption of Weber 45 DC03 carburetors. To improve the car's aerodynamics, the body design was modified in 1956. The large front air intakes recessed into the sides were replaced by 5 slits and 3 more were added behind the rear wheel. Later, the recessed air intakes were covered by a rectangular grille, while the rear slit air intakes remained. On model with Weber 45 DC03 carburetors, the hood with single or double row grille air intakes were replaced with new hoods with the 2 NACA-type air intakes. The nose, originally short, was modified in 2 stages, to a semi-long version starting with the chassis number 3062 and to a long version starting with the chassis number 3068. This modification added 2 circular air intakes at the front for brake cooling, while the main air intake received a Trident logo. Production of the 300S began in January 1955 and ended in June 1958. A total of 27 units and 33 engines were built. Fangio contract with Maserati was signed with an handshake between Argentinian and Commendatore Orsi, thanks to the collaboration of Marcello Giambertone, his manager. Giambertone was also the general secretary of the Scuderia Madonnina in Milan and was responsible for recruiting drivers for races in Europe. He had also established his own organization abroad, particularly in South America, which operated in a similar manner. His duty also included securing sponsorships, which were essential for obtaining new tires and fuel for each race. Fangio and Giambertone had known each other since 1949. Among the cars available to Giambertone in that racing season was the Maserati 300S chassis number 3067, recently acquired following the death of its previous owner and gentleman driver, Count Fernando Panalva Mascarenas. This car had recently been overhauled and repainted at the Maserati workshop in Modena. On February 1957, Giambertone had the car transported by ship to Cuba for the first automobile Grand Prix held on the island. He also made a good deal with Esso for the supply of gasoline and lubricants. Since 1919, Esso managed the importation, refining, and distribution of fuel with an extensive network of service stations in Cuba and had a large refinery in Havana Bay. The competition was strongly supported by the coup government of General Fulgencio Batista, while clashes with the revolutionary faction were still ongoing. To increase the number of tourists to the island and demonstrate to the world, particularly the United States, that they had the political situation under control. A street circuit was thus created, the main part of which was the Malecón, the waterfront road that connected the port of Havana to the old city. The circuit was 5.59 km long and requires 90 laps. The Federación Internacional dell'Automobile Technical Commission evaluated and approved the route during 1956. Giambertone entered 300S in the color of the Scuderia Madonnina Argentina, 3067 with Fangio at the wheel, and 3062 with Harry Schell, as well as 3 other cars in different categories: a Maserati 200S for Stirling Moss, a Maserati 150S for Alejandro De Tomaso, and a Ferrari 500 TR for Piero Drogo. Technical assistance was, as usual, provided by the manufacturer. Qualifying began on Saturday, February 23rd, with weather conditions alternating between rain and sunshine until the following day. Practice session was scheduled for the afternoon between 3 and 6 p.m. to make room for the competitor in the other races of the weekend. During the first day of qualifying, Fangio was less than pleased with the car, which lost power after each lap and was unstable on the corners, primarily because the road conditions were terrible, with alternating tarmac and cobblestone section, as well as some dangerous potholes. The Cuban climate also made it difficult to fine-tune the European cars. Excessive humidity created problems with the brakes, the sea level affected the carburetor performance, and the excessive heat complicated everything. After consulting with Nello Ugolini and Guerino Bertocchi, respectively Maserati team manager and Maserati chief mechanic, a solution was found by installing cooler spark plugs, increasing tire pressure, and adjusting the suspension accordingly. In this way, Fangio found the right setup that allowed him to set the fastest lap in 2.6 minutes and thus earn pole position. On Monday, February 25th, at 1:30 p.m., the stewards lined up the car on the starting line in front of nearly 100,000 cheering spectators. The weather was uncertain and occasionally cloudy. In the front row, the Maserati 300S of Schell, number 6, and Fangio, number 2, while in the center were the Ferrari 857S of Phil Hill, number 14, and Alfonso de Portago, number 12, which had 280 horsepower 4-cylinder engines. Despite having 35 horsepower more than the Maseratis, they weighed 80 kilos more. In the second row, the Ferrari 860 Monza of Eugenio Castellotti, number 8, and the Ferrari 410S of Carlo Shelby, number 18, equipped with a 340 horsepower 5-liter V12 engine, while in the center was Stirling Moss in the Maserati 200S, number 28. All 11 other competitors followed. Colonel Fernandez Miranda gave the green flag, and Shelby took the lead, followed by De Portago, Moss, and Castellotti. Behind the leading group was Fangio, who chose to start with a full tank. Hill, however, released the clutch early, stalling his engine, creating an hindrance to those behind. To avoid further problems, the team manager sent mechanics out to push him. thought this assistant cost him a 1-minute penalty. He restarted in last place, but due to a misunderstanding with the steward who waved the black flag to penalize him without receiving a response, he was disqualified on lap 8 and forced to retire. The difficulties of the track were clear to the Ferraris on the first lap. Just a drop of rain had made the tarmac slippery, which was already slippery due to the stock car race that morning. Shelby and Deportago collided because they were unable to properly transfer power to the ground, and the cars skidded sharply to the corners. Then Deportago took the lead, and Moss and Fangio slipped into his slipstream, relegating Shelby to 4th place. Moss maintained an excellent pace and lowered his lap time to 2.4 minutes. Unfortunately, on lap 13, an oil line cracked and began leaking oil onto the track during the following lap. Moss pitted on lap 16, where mechanics attempted a quick repair, but on the following lap, the pressure gauge dropped to 0, forcing him to retire. He left the car alongside the wall and walked back to the pits. Meanwhile, Deportago remained firmly in the lead, 45 seconds ahead of Fangio. The Argentinian driver was running a tactical race, saving his car from wear and tear and waiting for the Deportago stop for fuel. Behind them were Shelby and Castellotti, who was suffering from engine problems, followed by Peter Collins in the Ferrari 500TR. After the first half of the race, only 10 competitors remained. The others had all retired with engine or transmission problem, except Guartucci, who had punctured all the spare tires available under the regulation of his Ferrari 500TR. In the second half of the race, pit stop began. Castellotti was called first, then Peter Collins, then Master Gregory, all in Ferraris, then Olivier Gendebien, who stopped because he had burned his face from a broken oil seal and was replaced by Wolfgang von Trips. Fangio also pitted, but only for a quick exchange with Nello Ugolini, while the mechanic cleaned his windshield. Deportago stopped for fuel on lap 54, handing over the lead to Hill, who then retook it immediately afterwards. His advantage over Fangio remained at 40 seconds. However, having not yet refueled, Fangio was now lighter than Deportago and reduced his lead, posting a lap time of 2.2 minutes. The two, however, both maintained a one-lap lead over Shelby. On lap 57, Shell stopped for fuel and handed over to Moss, who quickly gained 2 positions over the next few laps, moving into 4th place. Castellotti broke a valve spring on lap 67 and retired. On lap 74, Moss set a time of 2.2 minutes, catching Shelby, but a spark plug problem forced him to retire, unfortunately for the second time that day, 3 laps later. Meanwhile, Deportago was having engine problem and pitted, allowing Fangio to catch up and take the lead. Tim Kinetti's mechanics worked tirelessly to fix the fuel pump and lines, while the Marquis Deportago seated on the bulkhead behind the driver's seat, shouting at them to hurry, and Canetti trying to calm him down. The problem was finally solved, but 5.15 minutes had passed, during which Fangio had gained 3 laps on him, and Shelby too. Deportago pushed the Ferrari as hard as he could, cheered on by the crowd, who were cheering on the driver they considered as a national hero. Now the task arose of lapping the remaining 6 competitors and catching Shelby. With the engine at the limit, the Spaniard averaged 166.2 km per hour, also setting the fastest lap at 2.1 minutes. Then, on lap 80, he lapped both Shelby and Fangio, closing the gap to 2 laps behind Fangio. In his haste, he lost control of the car on a curve, jumped a curb and hit a lamppost, damaging the right fender, but continued racing. Fangio kept his distance, knowing that Deportago would not have time to make up 2 laps because there were only 8 to go. And so it was. After 3 hours, 11 minutes and 2 seconds at an average speed of 158 km per hour, Fangio crossed the finish line victorious. Shelby followed, 1.14 minutes behind. Third but moral winner of the race was Deportago, who completed 89 laps. General Battista awarded Fangio an enormous trophy and immediately left the grandstand to take shelter in the car with his escort, pursued by a crowd of angry, unemployed people. Several gunshots were also heard. Then Deportago embraced Fangio and accompanied him raised in victory toward the cheering crowd that had literally invaded the seafront. It was a fitting end to a great sporting day. Later in the racing season, Fangio replaced the Maserati 300S chassis number 3067 with a more recently built one, the car with chassis number 3069, with which he won 3 competitions: the Grand Prix of Portugal, raced at the Monsanto circuit, the Grand Prix of Sao Paulo, raced at the Interlagos circuits, and the Grand Prix of Rio de Janeiro, raced at the Quinta da Boa Vista circuits, achieving so 4 victories in 1957 behind the steering wheel of the Maserati 300S. The secret of the 300S success was not attributable to a single feature of the car, but rather to an effective balance between all its components. For 2 seasons, it was the Modena-based manufacturer's best weapon, coming with a whisker of the 1956 World Sports Cars Championship title. However, changed to the Federación Internacional dell'Automobile regulation in 1957 and the disastrous accident caused by Deportago's Ferrari during the 24 Mille Miglia shortened the 300S racing life in Europe. But this Maserati model continued to enjoy success in numerous competitions in the United States and in South America, ending its sporting career in 1963. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share this video.